The moment I posted Tyler's drawing on Facebook, I knew I'd made a mistake. But not for the reason anyone would expect. It wasn't the picture itself. My 5-year-old son had drawn a simple stick figure family standing under a rainbow, the kind of cheerful, messy scribble that parents usually plaster all over refrigerators and office desks. In our case, it had been taped crookedly to the stainless steel fridge, its crayon lines constantly catching my eye when I grabbed milk or juice. I'd taken a picture of it because, for once, the house felt almost peaceful. Samantha was buried in her laptop at the kitchen table. Tyler was humming to himself while building with blocks in the living room, and the afternoon sun slanted through the windows in a soft, golden haze. I snapped a photo, added a quick caption, "Proud Dad moment," and hit share. 3 minutes later, my phone started vibrating so violently I thought it might crack in half. When I saw the caller ID, Lisa Patterson, my brother's ex-wife, I blinked twice, sure it had to be a mistake. I hadn't spoken to Lisa in 8 years, not since the divorce hearings where she'd cried into expensive tissues and told the court David was an irresponsible, unstable father. David, who had worked himself to exhaustion to provide for her. David, who had given me a kidney when I was 12 so I could live past my teenage years. I answered out of shock more than anything. "Jake, delete that post right now." Lisa's voice screeched through the speaker like shattering glass, ragged with panic. "Do you hear me? Delete it! And don't let Tyler out of your sight!" I froze, staring at the phone, then at the innocent drawing still taped to the fridge. "Lisa, what the hell are you talking about? It's a drawing. A kid's drawing." "Oh God," she whispered, breath hitching. "I thought it was over. I thought nobody would ever find out about my stash." Across the kitchen, Samantha looked up from her laptop, one perfectly shaped eyebrow rising. Her work emails and late-night projects were constant these days, though I'd come to realize they hid something much darker. She didn't speak, just observed me with the faint irritation of someone whose concentration had been interrupted. I walked into the living room, putting space between myself and Samantha's sharp eyes. "Lisa, slow down. What stash?" "The money, Jake." There was a tremor in her voice, the wavering tone of someone whose secrets were bubbling to the surface. "The money I've been hiding from the divorce settlement. I thought Tyler somehow saw it. I thought he drew it. That drawing, it looks like the hiding spot behind the water heater." I almost laughed. Almost. Lisa had always been wound a little too tight, but this was far beyond her usual dramatics. My brother used to tell me she had a talent for seeing conspiracies everywhere. A wrong glance from a neighbor meant someone was spying. A late bill meant the bank was sabotaging her. I'd forgotten just how deep her paranoia ran. "Lisa," I said carefully, "are you telling me you've been hiding money from David's divorce lawyer?" Silence. Then a defeated whisper. "Yes." This time the laugh burst out of me, sharp and humorless, the bark of a man already dealing with his own domestic disasters. It wasn't joy, it was recognition. Recognition that everyone apparently was lying to everyone. "How much, Lisa?" Another long pause. Then, $40,000. The number landed like a punch straight to my gut. David had been scraping by for years, 2 jobs, late rent checks, skipping meals so he could make child support payments on time. Meanwhile, Lisa had been living in a downtown condo with high ceilings and polished marble countertops. The betrayal twisted inside me like a knife. "Jake," she begged, voice shaking, "please, delete the post. I'll do anything. Just delete it." I stared again at Tyler's drawing, stick figures labeled Daddy, Mommy, and me. Innocent, simple, everything I used to think life was, before the day I found a burner phone in Samantha's laundry basket. "Anything?" I repeated softly. "Yes. Anything." A terrible idea bloomed inside my mind. Terrible, wonderful, cold-edged. The kind of idea that creeps in when your world is already collapsing and you're desperate to regain control. An idea that could solve two problems at once: Lisa's hidden betrayal and the bigger storm building with Samantha. Lisa had just volunteered to be my practice run. "Meet me at the town festival tomorrow," I said. 2 o'clock, by the main stage. Come alone. And bring a handwritten confession letter admitting everything, every penny you stole from David. "Jake, I can't." "You can," I said, my voice low and steady. "And you will, unless you want me to call David right now, and maybe the IRS. I hung up before she could respond. When I turned back, Samantha was standing in the kitchen doorway now, arms crossed, weight shifting to one hip. Even angry, she was beautiful, tall, blonde, the type of woman people whispered about when she walked through town. 10 years ago, I'd felt lucky to marry her. Now she felt like a prize I had somehow won by accident, one that kept slipping out of my hands. "What was that about?" she asked. "Family drama," I said. Not entirely untrue. "Lisa's having some financial problems." Samantha snorted, an edge of bitterness in her voice. "When isn't she? That woman has been a train wreck since the divorce." The irony was almost laughable. Samantha, with her late-night texts and hotel rendezvous with coworker Brent Morrison, judging someone else for lack of moral compass. I'd read the messages on that burner phone before she realized I'd found it. Plans for weekend getaways, pictures meant for his eyes alone, receipts from the Marriott downtown, all hidden behind the laziest password imaginable. Our anniversary date, October 15th. Even her betrayal was unoriginal. "I'm going to put Tyler to bed," I said. "I'll be up late working," she replied, already turning back to her laptop. "Don't wait up." Of course she would be working. I'd driven past her office last Thursday around 11 p.m. just to see for myself. The building had been dark, empty except for the security guard's car. But Brent Morrison's silver BMW had been parked confidently in front of the Marriott, and next to it, a Honda Civic that looked suspiciously like my wife's. Upstairs, Tyler was building a tower from wooden blocks. He looked up at me with those dark brown eyes, my eyes, full of seriousness that didn't quite match his age. "Daddy, look," he said, pointing proudly. "It's taller than me." "That's amazing, buddy." I sat on the edge of his bed, watching the tower wobble dangerously. "Can I ask you something?" He nodded, still focused on balancing a final block. "Do you remember going to Aunt Lisa's house last month?" "Yes," he said. "She had a big water heater in the basement. It made funny noises." So that was it. That harmless detail was what sent Lisa spiraling. Tyler had probably mentioned it to Samantha, who'd made some innocent comment online or in a text. Lisa's guilty conscience had done the rest. "Did you see anything else in her basement?" Tyler scrunched up his face, thinking. "She had a box behind the water heater. She said not to touch it. She said it had important papers." Important papers. Right. More like $40,000 in cash bundled with rubber bands. A hot surge of anger rose in me. Anger for David, for everything he'd lost while Lisa hid her secret stash. Then something darker set in, anticipation. Because Lisa was about to learn what happened when you hurt my family. And once I perfected the process with her, I would be ready for the bigger target. Samantha. After reading Tyler 2 bedtime stories and tucking him in, I kissed his forehead. "I love you, buddy." "Love you too, Daddy." Downstairs, I found Samantha still typing, but now she was also texting someone. The glow on her face wasn't the glow of work. It was the glow of someone eagerly waiting for a reply, and I knew exactly whose reply she wanted. My phone buzzed. A message from Lisa. "I'll be there. Please don't tell David." I stared at the screen and felt something cold settle in my chest. Practice begins tomorrow. The next morning, sunlight leaked through the blinds like it had no right to be here, painting thin gold stripes across the kitchen floor. Tyler was already up, the sound of tiny feet thumping down the hallway echoing faintly, as if the house itself were waking from a restless dream. I watched him from the doorway, still in my pajamas, cup of black coffee in hand, and felt the weight of the previous evening settle again. Lisa's phone call, the drawing, Samantha's lies, everything, the chaos of it all, was still humming in my brain, like a live wire I hadn't yet had the courage to touch. Tyler ran to the kitchen, blocks clutched in his small hands. "Daddy, look!" he exclaimed. "I made a castle taller than the tower." I smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach my eyes. "That's incredible, buddy. You're getting really good at building." He beamed and scrambled onto a chair, chattering about how his night figures were defending the castle from dragons. I nodded along, letting the innocent fantasy wash over me for a moment, a balm before returning to reality. I needed to think, and more importantly, I needed a plan. Lisa had agreed, begrudgingly but still, she would meet me at the town festival with a handwritten confession. And in the meantime, Samantha's betrayal was a smoldering ember waiting to ignite. I remembered the burner phone in the laundry basket, the way her password, our anniversary, had seemed almost like a taunt. I replayed every late-night project she claimed to be working on. I drove past the office again yesterday, just to confirm what I suspected. Empty, a ghost town. But there was the silver BMW outside the Marriott, parked neatly next to a car that unmistakably belonged to Samantha. I felt bile rise in my throat. She wasn't just lying. She was orchestrating a double life. And I had the receipts, the messages, the photographic proof tucked in a digital corner of my life she thought she controlled. I poured myself a second cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, watching Samantha through the doorway. She had this habit of pretending to be immersed in work, fingers flying over the keyboard, lips moving silently, like she was dictating invisible memos. Only a fool would think she was alone. I'd learned over 3 months of careful observation and secret surveillance that Brent Morrison was her co-conspirator in this elaborate deception. My wife, who once whispered about love and devotion in the early morning light, was now typing explicit messages, arranging secret hotel meetings, and leaving me to entertain Tyler while she played her own twisted game. Tyler wandered over and tugged at my sleeve. "Daddy, can we go to the festival today?" I froze for a heartbeat. The town festival. Tomorrow was the scheduled confrontation with Lisa, but today was practice, reconnaissance. I looked down at him, his wide eyes full of innocent expectation. "Not today, buddy. But we can plan a fun day this weekend, okay?" He pouted, clearly disappointed, but nodded. Kids were resilient, and I could use that resilience as a buffer while I dealt with the adult chaos swirling around me. After Tyler went off to play, I grabbed my laptop and started organizing my thoughts. Lisa was a live wire, unstable, but her fear was tangible. And fear, I reminded myself, was a tool. David had been cheated for years, living paycheck to paycheck, while Lisa stashed $40,000 behind a water heater in her basement. I pictured the hiding spot again, clear in my mind. A rusty, humming water heater, the box tucked behind it, labels carefully scrawled to deceive anyone who might peek. I tapped out a mental checklist. Step 1. Ensure Lisa came to the festival alone. Step 2. Obtain her handwritten confession. Step 3. Record her reaction and document every detail. Step 4. Secure the letter as leverage. Each step felt like laying bricks for a foundation I could build the rest of my revenge upon. Samantha was downstairs, still working, or pretending to work. Every so often she glanced at her phone, thumbs flicking rapidly. I knew who she was texting. Brent. My blood pressure rose. I forced myself to take a deep breath and think strategically. Acting in anger now would ruin everything. Patience was my ally. Observation, my weapon. I recalled Tyler's innocent comment about Aunt Lisa's water heater. The way he described the box and the important papers made my chest tighten. That boy had unwittingly unlocked a chain reaction. Lisa's guilt had been immediate, desperate, and now I had the leverage. But the same child, the same innocent soul, was also the reason I couldn't act recklessly with Samantha. Tyler had already begun noticing tension, subtle changes in my tone, the quiet, loaded silences between me and his mother. One wrong move and I'd drag him into this storm. I decided to test Lisa's limits. I crafted a carefully worded text to confirm our meeting. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock, main stage. Bring your confession. No excuses. Within minutes, her response arrived. I'll be there. Don't tell David. Good. Fear, once harnessed, could be precise. Samantha's next move required careful observation. I didn't confront her yet. Not until I was ready, until every piece of evidence was secured. I remembered the hotel receipts, the photos, the messages. I needed her to feel untouchable, confident, before the curtain fell. The longer I waited, the more perfect the trap would be. Mid-afternoon, Tyler came running to me again, carrying another tower of blocks. Daddy, look, it's a castle this time. Bigger than the tower. I smiled, fleeting, knowing these moments were temporary islands in a sea of chaos. I sat down beside him and offered quiet encouragement. That's incredible, buddy. You're building like a real architect, he giggled. Just like Mommy. I choked down the bitterness. Yes, like Samantha. The same woman hiding lies behind her polished smile. The woman who had been the center of my world, now a traitor in slow motion. Evening came, and with it, the familiar hum of domestic tension. Samantha cooked dinner, or pretended to. I kept Tyler occupied, reading him stories that distracted him from the growing weight in the house. At night, as I tucked him into bed, he whispered, half asleep, Daddy, everything's okay, right? I kissed his forehead, my chest tight with unspoken promises. Everything's going to be okay, buddy. Daddy's taking care of it. And for the first time since discovering Samantha's affair, since Lisa's frantic call, I felt a thrill of anticipation, because I had control now, control over Lisa, control over the situation. Samantha would come next. Downstairs, Samantha finally left her laptop, texting silently in the glow of the table lamp. I stayed in the shadows, drinking coffee, observing, planning. Tomorrow, Lisa would arrive at the festival. Tomorrow, I would see firsthand the results of my manipulation. And from that, I would prepare for the ultimate confrontation. Tyler's drawing hung on the fridge like a silent witness, an innocent illustration of a family that no longer existed in the form it once had. Daddy, Mommy, me. 3 simple stick figures, a rainbow overhead, and a hidden message invisible to anyone but those with eyes to see it. Tomorrow, the real test begins, and I would be ready. The morning of the town festival arrived bright and sunny, with a gentle breeze rustling the leaves along Main Street. Children's laughter spilled from every corner, ice cream vendors called out their daily specials, and the smell of funnel cakes and roasted nuts filled the air. Families strolled hand in hand, couples paused to admire handcrafted goods, and the local marching band began a surprisingly energetic rendition of a patriotic tune near the fountain. For most people, it was just another charming day in our small New England town. But for me, it was the stage for a performance that had been meticulously planned in my head for over 24 hours. I left Tyler with his babysitter, my sister-in-law, someone who didn't know the intricacies of the revenge plan I was about to execute, and drove the short distance to the festival. The moment I parked, I noticed the throngs of people moving in every direction. Colorful balloons floated over food stands, and the vibrant banners announcing the festival flapped cheerfully in the breeze. Everything looked harmless, innocent, joyous, and that was exactly why it was perfect. I stayed in the shadows at first, observing, scanning every approaching adult, every familiar face. The town wasn't huge, but it was big enough that Lisa could blend in if she tried. She was anxious, I knew it. The text she had sent last night confirmed it. "I'll be there. Don't tell David." Fear was sharp, and I intended to sharpen it further. I chose a vantage point near the main stage, crouching behind a cotton candy vendor whose large pink display hid me almost perfectly. I sipped my coffee, checking my watch for the fifth time in as many minutes. 2 o'clock. Not a minute earlier, not a minute later. Precision was everything. And then I saw her. Lisa Patterson. The same woman who had called me at midnight, voice trembling, practically begging me to protect her secret. She moved carefully, constantly glancing around as if expecting someone to leap out of the crowd and seize her. She wore a pale blue sundress, modest and conservative, almost an attempt to appear innocent, to blend in. But I recognized the tension in her shoulders, the nervous tapping of her foot. She had no idea I'd anticipated every one of her movements. As she approached the stage, I stepped from behind the cotton candy stand, keeping myself partially hidden behind a cluster of festival-goers. I had instructed her to bring the handwritten confession, and judging by the small envelope she clutched in her hand, she hadn't forgotten. Good. That letter would be the first tangible evidence that David's ex-wife had lied for years, hoarding money that belonged to him. I caught her eye from across the crowd. She froze for a split second, recognition flashing in her wide, anxious eyes. Then she continued walking, quickening her pace slightly, envelope clutched to her chest like a life raft. I approached her from an angle that made it seem like chance, and said softly, "Lisa." She jumped. Her lips parted, and for a moment, no sound came out. She looked around nervously, then down at the envelope, then back at me. "Jake, Let's go somewhere quieter," I interrupted, maintaining a calm tone that belied the adrenaline surging through me. "Main stage, just over there, away from prying eyes." She followed hesitantly, and we reached a small alleyway behind one of the vendor tents. The festival noise was muffled here, distant enough that our conversation could remain private. I gestured to a bench. She sat, still clutching the envelope. "Open it," I said. Her hands shook, but she obeyed. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper, the lines unevenly drawn and slanted, her handwriting unmistakable. I unfolded it carefully. Her words confirmed everything she had tried to deny: the money she'd hidden, the reasons for her lies, the intent to keep David in the dark while she lived comfortably downtown. Each line stung like a physical blow. "Why didn't you just tell him?" I asked quietly, almost rhetorically. $40,000. That's not pocket change. That's life-altering for someone like David. I was afraid," she admitted, eyes brimming with tears. "I didn't want to lose everything. I thought if he knew, he'd ruin me and everything I worked for. I just wanted security." I nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. Fear, desperation, and greed had been her guides. But now, she had no control. "Do you realize what you've done?" I said, voice low, cold. 3 years of your ex-husband scraping by while you hoarded his money. Do you realize how that looks to the people who trusted you?" Her hands trembled. I'm sorry. I didn't think anyone would find out. You're going to learn a hard lesson today," I interrupted. "Because sometimes apologies aren't enough. Actions have consequences." She looked at me, panic creeping into her face. "Jake, please, don't do anything crazy. I'll fix this. I'll give it all back. I swear." I took a deep breath, letting her fear marinate just enough to make her truly understand the gravity of the situation. This wasn't about cruelty. It was about justice, in a sense. David had suffered. He had been cheated. And Lisa was finally going to face the reality she had tried so hard to avoid. "First, we document everything," I said, producing my phone. I started recording her reactions, capturing every tremor in her voice, every flicker of panic in her eyes. I also snapped photos of the envelope and the confession letter itself. Evidence. Immutable proof. Lisa's breathing quickened. Please, please don't make this worse than it already is. I smiled thinly. It's not worse than it already is. This is just clarity. You're finally being honest. You're finally accountable. She nodded, swallowing hard, eyes wide and terrified. I could almost see the weight of 3 years' worth of lies pressing down on her chest. The realization hit her fully. She couldn't control this anymore. Not me, not the letter, not even the festival crowd she had tried to hide within. I paused. I could have humiliated her here, shouted, exposed her publicly. But no, this was practice. The stakes were small compared to what I was preparing for. Samantha's betrayal loomed ahead, and every move here needed to refine my approach. Good, I said finally. Now, the next step is yours. You fix what you've done, but you follow my instructions. You don't tell David anything until I say so. Do you understand? Yes, she whispered. I understand. Good. I stepped back, letting her breathe, letting her realize the power had shifted. Fear was a tool, yes, but so was restraint. Sometimes withholding action was more potent than acting immediately. We lingered there for a moment longer, the distant laughter and music of the festival a strange counterpoint to the tension between us. Then I handed the envelope back. Keep this with you. You'll need it when the time comes to make amends. And remember, honesty isn't easy, but it's always the safest path. Lisa nodded silently, clutching the envelope as if it were a lifeline. And I knew she understood, in her own way, that she was no longer in control. As she walked back toward the festival crowd, her steps hesitant, unsure, I allowed myself a moment to breathe. One confrontation complete, one rehearsal done, I had tested my ability to manipulate, to pressure, to expose someone while maintaining control. I had learned how fear could be used to sharpen compliance, how anticipation could make a person stumble over their own guilt. And now I thought, it was time to prepare for the real target, Samantha. The drawing on the fridge, Tyler's innocent creation, flashed in my mind. Daddy, Mommy, me. Everything that seemed simple and pure could be a weapon, a reminder, a trigger. And I was ready. Tomorrow, I'd start applying the lessons learned today. The festival had been practice. Samantha's betrayal would be the main stage, and I would ensure that this time, the stakes were life-altering for her. Because just like Lisa, she would learn that actions have consequences. And unlike Lisa, there would be no retreat, no safe harbor, no excuses. The town festival faded behind me as I left, vibrant and lively, and oblivious to the storm quietly gathering in the small alleyway where truth and fear had collided. And in that quiet, I smiled. The morning after the festival, the town seemed oblivious to the storm that had quietly passed among its cheerful streets. Children rode carousel horses, parents bartered over handmade candles and artisanal soaps, and the local radio station blasted upbeat pop songs into the crisp air. But in my mind, the events of the previous day had etched themselves like scars, and I couldn't focus on anything mundane. Lisa's confession, trembling in my hands, her face pale and terrified, replayed over and over. The evidence was mine now. Every word she had written, every detail she had confessed, would serve as a cornerstone for the next phase of my plan. I returned home early, eager to observe Samantha without revealing my own thoughts. Tyler was still asleep, his small frame curled beneath a thick quilt, the morning light spilling across his face and catching the soft waves of his hair. I lingered in the doorway for a moment, watching him breathe, heart tight with the paradox of love and rage. This child, my son, was the only pure thing in a household filled with secrets, betrayals, and lies. Every move I made from this point forward had to account for him. Downstairs, Samantha was already awake, or at least she appeared to be. Her laptop was open, the glow of the screen casting a pale light across her face as she typed. Occasionally, she glanced at her phone and smiled faintly, an expression of satisfaction reserved for conspirators or lovers who thought themselves unseen. I poured myself coffee and moved silently through the kitchen, careful not to alert her to my presence. I had discovered enough in the past weeks to know how she operated. Every action, every hidden message, every clandestine meeting had a pattern. And like all patterns, once recognized, they could be exploited. Lisa's confession was carefully stored in a small, locked box in my study, a place only I had the key to. I had read it multiple times, each word etched into my mind. $40,000 hidden behind a water heater, years of deception. A misguided sense of security that now, thanks to my intervention, had been stripped away. The weight of it wasn't lost on me. Lisa had underestimated me, underestimated the subtlety of observation and patience, and now she had paid the price of her arrogance. I knew Samantha's betrayal required a different approach. She was cunning, practiced in manipulation, and far more dangerous than Lisa. Her affair with Brent Morrison, hidden beneath the guise of work projects and late-night emails, was an intricate web. I had enough evidence to confront her, but the method had to be precise, deliberate, and psychologically impactful. Unlike Lisa, Samantha couldn't be coerced into fear with a simple threat. She needed exposure, a careful orchestration that would dismantle her confidence while leaving no doubt about her culpability. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee steaming, reviewing the photographs and messages I had captured from her burner phone. Each hotel receipt, each explicit photograph, each planned weekend rendezvous painted a picture of betrayal so clear it bordered on artful. Brent Morrison's name appeared repeatedly, his presence a constant reminder that Samantha's duplicity was not an isolated lapse, but a meticulously maintained double life. Tyler's laughter drifted from upstairs, pulling me momentarily from the abyss of scheming. He was playing with blocks again, building towers and castles, the simple joy of creation, an ironic counterpoint to the calculated destruction unfolding beneath the same roof. I found myself envying his innocence, longing for the days before betrayal and fear had infiltrated every corner of my domestic life. The phone buzzed. A message from Lisa. "I'm keeping it safe. I'll do exactly as you say." Her words were careful, cautious, and fully aware of the leverage I held. Good. Fear tempered by obedience was a potent tool, and I intended to wield it further when necessary. As I considered my next steps, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway drew my attention. A silver BMW, unmistakable in its sleek design, parked neatly near the curb. My heart sank momentarily. Brent Morrison. The man who had been the recipient of Samantha's secret correspondence, the architect of her nighttime escapades, was here. I watched from the shadows as he stepped out, phone in hand, checking messages, oblivious to the fact that I observed him. His presence complicated matters. Samantha's betrayal was no longer a private affair. It had external accomplices. Brent's involvement elevated the stakes, and any misstep could expose Tyler to a level of conflict he was too young to comprehend. I decided on a course of action that balanced observation with subtle intimidation. I remained out of sight, noting every detail of Brent's behavior. His posture, the way he glanced toward the house, his obvious expectation of a meeting with Samantha, all provided insight into the patterns of their interactions. The knowledge was power, and power was something I intended to exploit fully. Samantha emerged from the kitchen, laptop in hand, unaware that I was observing both her and her accomplice. Her expression shifted when she noticed the car. Subtle, fleeting panic, an emotion I had come to recognize as a telltale sign of guilt. Brent moved toward her with a casual air, but the slight hesitation in her step betrayed her nerves. I stayed hidden, recording every movement, every whispered word, every subtle gesture. This was not confrontation, it was reconnaissance. The goal was to understand, to predict, to prepare for a moment when the leverage would be absolute, the exposure complete. Hours passed. Brent left eventually, and Samantha returned to the pretense of work. But I had seen enough. The information collected today would feed into a plan far more intricate than anything I had executed with Lisa. The stakes were higher, the target more dangerous, and the potential fallout far more significant. I reflected on the events of the festival, the confession of Lisa, and the evidence of Samantha. The lessons were clear. Fear was a tool, patience was a weapon, and evidence, once secured, became an unassailable form of power. I had practiced with Lisa, tested the dynamics of guilt and panic, and now the main stage awaited. Samantha's betrayal would be laid bare with precision, and the consequences would be irreversible. Tyler's drawing still hung on the refrigerator, a silent reminder of innocence lost, a catalyst for the unfolding drama. Daddy, Mommy, Me, 3 stick figures under a rainbow, a simple illustration that had become the thread connecting betrayal, discovery, and revenge. I stared at it, feeling a mixture of longing and determination. The drawing represented what I had lost and what I intended to reclaim, not for myself, but for the family that had been fractured by deceit. Night fell, and I sat in the dim light of the study, reviewing every message, every photograph, every detail of the confession letter. Strategy formed like steel in my mind. Samantha's lies had created an opening, and I intended to exploit it fully. The art of revenge, I realized, was not merely in the act itself, but in the orchestration, in the patient, deliberate manipulation of circumstance and psychology. As I closed the files and set the envelope of Lisa's confession in its secure place, I allowed myself a moment of grim satisfaction. The rehearsal had been successful, fear had been induced, control had been asserted, and most importantly, I had learned. Tomorrow, I thought, would bring the next act. Samantha would unknowingly step into the trap I had set, and the consequences of her betrayal would finally be measured. The path ahead was clear, methodical, and irreversible. And as Tyler slept peacefully upstairs, dreaming of castles and dragons, I prepared myself for the confrontation that would define the next chapter of our fractured lives. The stage was set, the players were in motion, and the reckoning was inevitable. The night after Brent's unexpected visit stretched into a long, heavy silence that pressed against the walls of the house like invisible fog. Outside, the streetlights shimmered against the pavement, illuminating the emptiness of the cul-de-sac. Inside, the house felt like a stage waiting for its actors to step back into place. Every creak of the wooden floors, every hum of the heater, every distant dog bark amplified the tension brewing inside my chest. Samantha had retreated to the bedroom hours ago, claiming exhaustion from work, though I knew better. Guilt had a way of draining energy faster than any job could. She closed the door not with the casual ease of a wife settling in for the night, but with the cautious hesitation of someone terrified of being caught in a lie. I didn't follow her. I sat in the study, the dim amber lamp casting a warm glow over the documents laid out before me. Lisa's confession, the screenshots from the burner phone, the hotel receipts, and the photographs Brent had sent my wife at 2 a.m, images meant to seduce her, but now serving as evidence of her betrayal. The keys on my laptop clicked softly as I organized everything into a neat, chronological timeline. Every message had a date, every hotel booking a timestamp, every betrayal a documented place on the map of Samantha's deception. I wasn't building a case for divorce yet, not a legal one. I was building a psychological one. Revenge is not about rage. Rage is sloppy. Rage is loud. Rage gets you caught. Real revenge is quiet, precise, sterile, cold. I took a slow breath and closed the folders. It was time to act, not with the recklessness of a wounded husband, but with the patience of a surgeon preparing for an operation. And Samantha was my patient. The next morning unfolded exactly as I predicted. Samantha woke early, brewed coffee, and moved through the kitchen with choreographed normalcy. Her eyes were puffy, not from sleep but from stress. She had always been terrible at hiding emotional strain. One could read her face like a cheap paperback left on a bus seat. "Morning," she said with a carefully curated smile. I matched her tone. "Morning." Tyler sat at the table eating cereal, swinging his small feet under the chair, oblivious to the silent war raging between his parents. He giggled at something on his tablet, a bright spot in the otherwise gray morning. Samantha kissed him lightly on the head, then grabbed her travel mug. "I have meetings downtown. Might be late." "Of course," I replied. "Work is important." The words hung between us, not an accusation, just an observation. But Samantha stiffened, eyes darting briefly toward mine, searching for the hidden meaning she feared I might be hiding. Then she left. But she didn't go to any meeting. I waited 20 minutes, grabbed my jacket, and left quietly through the back door. My car was parked a few blocks away, an intentional detail I had prepared for weeks. I followed her from a distance, traffic light reflections dancing across my windshield like silent applause for the show unfolding ahead of me. Samantha didn't head downtown. She drove to a hotel. Their hotel. The same one that showed up on the receipts I had photographed. I parked on the opposite side of the street, watched her hesitate in the parking lot, then walk briskly toward the side entrance where Brent was waiting. He wore a navy coat, his hair slicked back, looking every bit the confident adulterer who believed he had outsmarted a husband too busy or too naive to notice. The two exchanged a quick hug, quick enough to be dismissible, intimate enough to be unmistakable. I recorded everything, not out of spite, not out of jealousy, but because evidence was a currency, and soon enough I would spend it. Brent and Samantha disappeared inside. I didn't follow them. I didn't need to. My goal wasn't to catch them in the act, it was to let them think they were still safe. The illusion of safety makes the drop far more devastating. By noon, I was back home. Tyler was watching cartoons, completely content. I sat beside him, ruffling his hair gently. He leaned into me, a reflex born from years of trust. "Daddy?" "Yeah, buddy?" "Mommy said we're going to the zoo tomorrow." I smiled faintly. "We'll see." "Do you not want to go?" "Oh, my son, if only you knew the worlds hidden beneath your simple question." But he was 5. Innocent. Unscarred. His world revolved around dinosaurs, crayons, and snacks. "We'll talk about it," I said softly. He nodded and returned his focus to the screen. I watched him for a moment longer, then rose and headed back to the study. It was time to assemble the second phase of my plan, exposure without confrontation. I opened the laptop and drafted an email. To Samantha. Subject: Thoughts. I kept the message simple. "We need to talk tonight. I have something important to show you." I didn't mention what. I didn't hint. I didn't accuse. Ambiguity is poison to a guilty conscience. Within minutes, she replied, "Is everything okay?" I didn't respond. Let her sit with the anxiety. She came home that evening 2 hours earlier than usual. Her eyes were frantic, her movements jittery. Tyler was playing in the living room. She kissed him, hugged him too long, then turned to me. "We should talk upstairs," she said in a voice too soft to be natural. "Yes," I agreed. "We should." She followed me to the study. I let her enter first, then closed the door quietly behind us. Samantha stood in the center of the room as though she might bolt at any moment. Her hands trembled slightly, her lips pressed together in a thin line. "What's going on, Jake?" she asked, desperately trying to anchor her voice. I walked to the desk, opened a drawer, and placed the first item on the table. A printed screenshot. Samantha's face drained of color instantly. It was a photo of her and Brent in a hotel room mirror. She reached for it with a gasp, but I pulled it back before she could touch it. "I have more," I said calmly. "Much more." Her knees buckled slightly. She reached for the back of the chair to steady herself. "This isn't... Jake. This isn't what it looks like." "Don't insult me," I snapped, the coldness in my voice slicing through the air. "I know everything." Tears filled her eyes. "Please, Jake. Please. I'm so sorry. Let me explain. It wasn't supposed to." "It never is." She collapsed into the chair, sobbing quietly. Not dramatically. Not performatively. These were real tears. The kind shed by someone who knew the world she had built out of lies was collapsing. For a moment I simply watched her, not with pity, not with anger, but with clarity. The same clarity I had gained from Lisa. Control wasn't in the yelling or the confrontation. Control was in the quiet, the soft voice, the unshakable calm. She wiped her eyes. "What are you going to do?" I leaned back against the desk. "That depends." "On what?" she whispered. "On how honest you are from this moment forward." She swallowed hard. "I'll tell you anything." "Good." I placed a small notebook in front of her. "Then start writing." "What?" "A written confession. Everything, dates, places, details, Brent's involvement, your messages, your plans." She stared at the notebook like it was a venomous animal. Jake, I can't." "You can," I said. "And you will." "What are you going to do with it?" she asked shakily. "That depends too." Her face twisted with fear. "Jake, please. I don't want to lose Tyler." "You already did," I said coldly. "You just don't know it yet." She sobbed again, gripping the edges of the notebook before finally opening it. And then she began to write. It took over an hour for her to finish. When she was done, I took the notebook without reading it and placed it into the same lockbox that held Lisa's confession. 2 women, 2 lies, 2 confessions. The symmetry was almost poetic. Samantha watched me with broken eyes. "What happens now?" I didn't answer. Instead, I walked past her, opened the door, and paused. "Tomorrow," I said, "we'll discuss the consequences." She stared at me, desperate for more information, but I gave her none. Ambiguity would do the work for me overnight. She went to bed without another word. I remained downstairs, not to think, not to plan, but simply to exist in the quiet, letting the house settle around me like dust around old bones. The next morning, Samantha moved through the house like a ghost. Tyler noticed. "Mommy, why are your eyes red?" he asked. "I'm just tired, sweetheart," she murmured, brushing his hair. She avoided meeting my gaze. Good. Fear wasn't the end goal. Fear was just the beginning. My real goal was freedom, not from my marriage, but from the lies it had become. Samantha would live with the consequences of her actions. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to threaten her. The evidence was enough. She knew what I had. She knew what I could do. And that knowledge alone was the leash she had put around her own neck. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that the real revenge had already been set in motion, not against her, not against Brent, but against the version of myself they had both believed was too blind to see, too weak to act, and too forgiving to retaliate. They had both underestimated me. Lisa thought I'd keep her secret. Samantha thought I'd never find out. Brent thought I'd never fight back, but I was done being the quiet husband, the good brother, the compliant man. I had practiced with Lisa. I had perfected the technique with Samantha. And now I was ready to dismantle every lie, every betrayal, every person who thought they could twist my life into something I wouldn't recognize. The version of me that existed before Tyler's drawing was gone. In his place stood someone patient, someone calculating, someone dangerous. Revenge wasn't coming, revenge was already here. And I, not Samantha, not Brent, not Lisa, would write the final chapter.